Hey folks, welcome to the Dark Horse podcast. I am sitting today with Mattias Desmet, who is a professor of clinical psychology at Ghent University. He also holds a master's degree in statistics. Professor Desmet, welcome to Dark Horse.
Thank you, Bret. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am pretty excited about this conversation. I have been steeped in your work, not for very long, but I have looked carefully at it, and I have found a tremendous amount that resonates for me.
So, in my opinion, I do believe that mass formation in many respects should be considered a state of madness. And I know that I just said that I don't use the term psychosis.
Yep.
But if you mean with madness a process in which an individual participates in something that might lead to his own destruction, then I would say that it is a kind of madness. And I think it is even important to consider it like that, because I think that whether you go along with the masses or whether you defy the masses, in both scenarios, you might very well become the victim of the masses. And, Stalin, for instance, started to he eliminated in the end 60% of the members of his own Communist Party, without them having the possibility to prevent them from being eliminated, because it was almost at random that he picked them and that he condemned them to death. And in the same way, I think that is exactly what is so important to realize, that you never have to try to destroy the masses. In the end, they will always just exhaust themselves, potentially destroy themselves. But what you should focus on is preventing that they destroy you. And that's if you look at the psychological from a psychological perspective, if you look at the mechanism, then you can see that the most crucial thing, I always repeat that's the most important message I can bring at this moment, is that the better you understand the psychological mechanism of mass formation, the more you understand that it is just crucial that dissonant voices continue to speak out. And why? Because by continuing to speak out, you exactly prevent that the madness of the masses and their leaders becomes complete, and that the masses end up in the state in which they become so fanatically convinced that everyone who goes against them is actually inhumane, lacks solidarity, lacks citizenship, is irrational, and so on, and consequently should be destroyed exactly because he is so inhumane. So that this, I think, the entire process for me shows that we are dealing with a process which leads people to a complete blindness, a complete self-destructiveness, and a complete absurdity, in which you should always consider as a kind of a state in which people, in which the mental capacities of people are very limited. I think that many people try to explain mass formation from the perspective of just follow the money and you will understand why they do it, or just realize that there are power-hungry individuals who want to be in charge of everything. I agree with Hannah Arendt that is not right. The typical characteristics of totalitarian leaders is not that they are after the money, or not that they want more and more power. The typical characteristic of a totalitarian leader is his radical ideological blindness. The radical ideological blindness which pushes him to impose his ideology to the collective and to society, no matter what the cost is, even if it means that he will be killed himself, that he will lose everything. The typical totalitarian leader will typically continue trying to impose his ideology to society. And then at the lower levels of a totalitarian state, you find psychopaths, perverts, people who are after the money, people who want power, and so on. But the top level is characterized by ideological blindness, I think.
Okay.
That I I discovered many new friendships during the crisis. And in my experience, it existed of really strong bonds between the individuals. I don't think that I started to form a mass with other people. Like, look, when you and me are talking now, we can have a different opinion.
Yes, I was just going to say this.
Yes, yes.
That's how we know this isn't a mass.
Yes, that's how we know it isn't a mass.
We haven't agreed on some abstraction. Even, you know, if we were going to, right, the group of people that we are now mutually in contact with have resonated with mass formation as an idea, and we have seen it move around. So if there was an idea that we were all going to sign on to and not notice, you know, that there was an incompleteness here or a paradox there, that would be it. But you're right, we're not doing that. And that is, maybe that's the check that we need to know that we are not in a mass is, are we holding each other's feet to the fire or not, right? And I don't want to be part of any group that isn't willing to honorably hold each other's feet to the fire. For one thing, that's how we make sense. That's the whole point of the endeavor, right? We will freeze ourselves in place with a narrative that isn't true if we don't pressure test it and challenge each other.
Indeed, yes. But I think suddenly it seems to me to be a very attractive idea or a very attractive question. Like, indeed, on the one hand, we could say that from a rational point of view, the smartest choice is to go along with the masses and to feel protected by the masses. On the other hand, we could also say, no, it's the other way around. It's better to belong to the small group, because if you do the right thing as a small group, if you stick to your ethical principles, you will go through this fast process of evolution, which has been described by many people, and which maybe is the real destiny of the human being, to become an ethically aware human being with an enlightened mind.
Perfect. And, you know, I keep trying to explain to people who, you know, as I'm sure happens with you, people will come up and they will say, you're very brave, I admire you, this, that, and the other. I try to explain this situation left no choice. I literally do not know how I would have done the other thing, right? I wouldn't have been able to stand it for 5 minutes. And so it is that which, it does rob it of a certain amount of courage. I didn't have a choice. I didn't make the choice to do this. It just simply was the only thing that was tolerable. But it does raise this other question. One of the things I saw 2 mass formations in a row, right? There's the mass formation around woke ideology, which did the same thing. It created a group of people who came together from very different perspectives, battled the irrationality of the claims, and it was a wonderful chapter. Then when COVID came, it shocked me because it took the group of people who had formed this anti-mass to the woke ideology, and it divided it. Some of the people who saw right through the woke ideology fell right in line with the I call them medically woke, right? It's equally irrational, and yet and they've demonstrated the capacity to see through irrational things and the courage to do it. And yet in this case, something about this story was in their blind spot. I can't understand it. Maybe you do. Why is it that people who have resistance to this in one context don't have resistance in another?
Yes, I think that the emergence of the woke culture in our society was like a preparatory phase for the large mass formations that still have to come. Because in my opinion, the Corona crisis was the first real mass formation, because it has this baffling characteristic that it split all the existing groups in 2. That's the signature of a real mass formation. It is energetically so strong that it redivides, reorganizes the entire social structure. Yes, and once one real mass formation emerged in society, very often a second one and a third one and a fourth one follows, just because the mass formation recreates the conditions that made it emerge. Mass formation started on the basis of loneliness and disconnectedness, but the mass formation itself leads to even much more disconnectedness and loneliness. While it seems to do the opposite in the beginning, it destroys the social bond further. And after a mass formation, there is even more lonely people, more disconnected people, which very often makes that a second mass formation and a third one emerges shortly after the first one ceased to or disappeared a little bit in the background. So I believe that the phenomenon is very well known. If a real mass formation emerges, then something happens, something very specific happens in certain people, which is referred to as mental surrender. People who were convinced anti-totalitarians or anti-fascists, or no matter what, very often suddenly become fascists themselves as soon as a fascist mass formation emerges, just because they don't have the mental energy or the psychological strength to prevent that, or all the energy is sucked away from their mental representations and invested in in only this limited set of mental representations that is shared by the group. So, and many people, I know personally many people who wrote articles. Many people I know a few people who wrote articles about the dangers of technocratic totalitarianism, about the dangers of extreme collectivism and conformism. And then the Corona crisis started, and in the blink of an eye, they conformed to the mainstream narrative, and they declared everyone crazy who didn't go along with the mainstream narrative. So that's the strange thing. And in my case, exactly not the opposite happened, but something different happens. I had exactly the same experience as the one that you described, and I talked about it in numerous podcasts before this one. That in the beginning of the crisis, I realized immediately I will speak out. I have no other option, and I will continue speaking out, no matter what it brings to me, or no matter what the consequences are. I just immediately knew if I don't speak out now, I will never have to speak out, and I will do it. I will just do it. And I started to speak almost without. I didn't have the feeling that I choose for it. I knew it. I will speak out. You know, this experience in itself, for me, compensates for everything that I have lost in the crisis, which is not so much. I have been excommunicated from certain groups at university. I won't be too dramatic about it, but still, no matter what I would lose, I would want to give it, if I have this phenomenon in return, that you feel this soft power that is increasing in myself, and that for me is the essence of life, actually.
I agree, and I wish I knew how to convey what you're describing to a larger audience. I will say it's very interesting to hear that you have polarized the institutions you've been part of. I've had that same phenomenon. I've polarized every institution I've been a part of. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when people who haven't had that experience hear it, they think, how terrible that you're polarizing. And the answer is, no, I want the respect of the people that I think their respect means something, right? If you polarize an institution and all of the people who are, phonies or corrupt or cowards, if they all, line up against you, and the people that you actually admire are like ready to acknowledge, yeah, you make sense, then the answer is, well, what else would you have done? Do you want the respect of people who aren't respectable? I don't, right? Mm-hmm. And so what you are describing, what I think I have also experienced, is a training program for something. It's a developmental experience that generates certain characteristics that if you have them, you're not eager to trade them for something else.
If you practice and if you constantly try to articulate the words that you consider to be sincere and honest words, no matter what the consequences are, and no matter how the group reacts to it, then you will slowly start to be more aware of your own existence as a human being. You will start to feel stronger. You will feel your real identity. You will be less in need of all kinds of ego and fake identities. And I think for me, the human being is intrinsically dependent on the quality of his speech. I think that the quality of our speech, and then I don't mean the aesthetical qualities, but the sincerity and of speech and the courage of your words determines in a straightforward way the strength of your soul and the strength of your mind, I think. And I think the better we realize that, the more we know that maybe we should tolerate that they take everything away of us in the end. But we should make sure that they don't take away our humanity, and that we, if we have to die, that we die with our principles and not without. That's something that I became much more aware of during this crisis. Like what is important and what is not important in this life here.
I will say this was a great conversation, and I feel that I have encountered a kindred spirit and a fellow polarizer of institutions, and that's got to be good. So this has been extremely enjoyable. I hope